Clay Travis joins us as we return. Clay, hope all things are well, man.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Getting ready to head out to Las Vegas here in a couple hours.
That's not bad at all.
Well done.
Things are not as good for Bally Sports, Clay, and regional sports partnerships with the news. I know you've been following with the bankruptcy. What do you make of all of this and what this could signify moving forward?
Well, there was clearly – so my last book was kind of dealt with this to a certain extent. I've been writing about this off and on for really a decade or so. This is the bubble bursting on the cable and satellite bundle as it pertains to the regional sports networks. And I'm sure people out there listening right now consume a variety of local teams, like where we live in Nashville. I watch, I think it's Bally Sports South or Bally South or whatever it's called. I don't know what the title of it is right now. But the easy way to think about this is initially these were all Fox Sports channels by and large. And these are local, regional cable and satellite channels that carried local teams. So if you're in Detroit, you got the Detroit Tigers games. If you're in, like we said, Atlanta, you got the Atlanta Braves. And these were sold as part of a $71 billion with a B asset purchase by Disney from Fox. And then almost immediately, the Department of Justice said, okay, you can buy these assets from Fox, but these regional sports networks are an antitrust violation because of you owning ESPN, ESPN2, SEC Network, and the like. And so Disney had to put these for sale, and Bally bought them, and Sinclair is the parent company. And it actually ended up being a benefit to Disney that they weren't left with these assets on their books. And Bloomberg, for people following this, is now reporting that all of these regional sports networks are going to have to file for bankruptcy because their business has collapsed as a result of cable cord cutting and the lack of subscribers out there to support this business model.
So, Clay, what do you think is next for all of these? You know, we'll mention watching Braves games on Bally Sports Southeast. What comes out of all of this if this model is now breaking down to where these leagues that play so many games over the course of a season, where are they going to find their TV home?
Well, I think there's going to be it's going to take a few years. I don't know. All these deals, remember, run for different periods of time, and exactly what that bankruptcy looks like, what the ownership looks like of these contracts when they come out. But I think the end result is going to be that, 6 years from now or 5 years from now, and certainly 10 years from now, everybody who wants to watch these games is going to have to pay for a streaming subscription. So instead of being able to sit down and watch them by and large on your cable and satellite package, I think you'll have to sign up for those on an individual basis, which is the big story here. Is the cable and satellite bundle was actually a pretty good deal for your average sports fan. And already you're seeing it start to fray in fairly substantial ways, particularly, Amazon Prime now has Thursday Night Football. Apple's going to have the MLS if you're an MLS fan. YouTube, which is owned by Google, is going to have the NFL Sunday Ticket going forward. So the days, I think, of a fan sitting down in front of the television and just putting on the television guide and being able to find every single sporting event that they would want to watch. ESPN Plus has got the UFC. I mean, I could continue to break this down. I think increasingly those games are going to move to streaming services that individual fans are going to have to purchase, and it's actually going to cost a lot more than a cable and satellite subscription used to, which I think a lot of people are kind of having a light bulb moment go off, and you're sitting around saying, wait a minute, I pay for Amazon Prime, I pay for HBO Max, I pay for Paramount, I pay for Disney Plus, all of these different outlets, and you may still have a cable and satellite subscription, all these different streaming services stacking one on top of another, Netflix, are going to end up costing more than the cable and satellite bundle did standing alone.
Clay, we all know that one of the best professions to fail in is coaching. with the buyout money, right? And I realize that not every coach has a 28-year-old Polish model as their girlfriend. But why don't more coaches take the Kliff Kingsbury approach, buying a one-way ticket somewhere and getting away from the game?
I think there is a fear to not taking opportunities, because in order to climb your way up to become a head coach in the NFL, you kind of have to have a maniacal focus on your career and be willing to go wherever the job is from the time you start off, making $20,000 a year as a low-level grinder. And I think there's a fear of being left behind. Candidly, a lot of coaches don't have either the youth or the money that Kliff Kingsbury has. But I think there's a lot of guys who envy that choice that he made to just bail and be unreachable for a while. And I think it probably makes you more desirable as a coaching hire to not be as available and sprinting towards a job every single time. And I imagine that Kliff Kingsbury is just burned out. He's put everything he has into trying to win games, and that relationship with Kyler Murray, and he's probably just wanting to totally recharge. And I don't begrudge that decision at all. I mean, I think there's a part of everybody out there that would love to just kind of toss their cell phone as far as they could, who has a job like that, who has a job that's 24/7. And be unreachable for some period of time where you kind of just get to live moment to moment, which I'm sure has some appeal to Kliff Kingsbury. And when you've got all that money coming in, tens of millions of dollars, he doesn't have any immediate necessity to work. He doesn't even have a family, right? So yeah. I imagine for a lot of people, the reason why they don't vanish is because, they've got a kid's basketball game coming up on Saturday or Sunday, or they've got responsibilities to get kids to school and things like that. I know I can't just vanish. I mean, the reason why I'm going to Las Vegas is because two of my kids are competing in an event out there. So, until they get to be 18 years old or more and don't need me on a day-to-day basis, go off to college, I've got a decade of dad responsibility and 20 years or so plus of dad responsibility. But to my knowledge, Kliff Kingsbury doesn't have a kid. And it's probably not a bad lifestyle to be, 43 or 44, be super rich and be able to just date Instagram models.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a lot of people out there listening to us right now that say that doesn't sound like a bad life.
Chad, he's basically it's Kingsbury DiCaprio that can pull this off.
The same person. My daughter's softball draft is really stopping me from getting away to Thailand for a couple of weeks right now on Monday night. The only thing holding me back, Clay. I floated this idea out yesterday about the Big Ten. If they are going to expand, why not look into the Ivy League? If they're that worried about academics, now there's legislation because of antitrust rulings where the Ivy League could be offering athletic scholarships moving forward. What do you think about Harvard and Yale being two of the additions to the Big Ten, and what those schools could offer the Big Ten, what they could offer prospective athletes out there as well as part of the Big Ten?
I think there's a 0% chance of it happening. I don't think people care about Harvard and Yale athletics. So if you're going to expand, first of all, I don't think the Big Ten is going to expand. So the number one rule of expansion is you only expand if there's a substantial amount of money to be gained from primarily like a television streaming service, increasing the amount of interest in your game. And I don't think the markets of New Haven, Connecticut, or Boston, Massachusetts bring much to the Big Ten. I think if the Big Ten were going to expand, it would probably be a no-brainer. They would have taken, let's say, Washington and Oregon. And I'm just tossing those two schools out there because I think they could have had them, and those are big markets, and it would, connect with the LA. If they wanted to stay in California, they could have had Stanford, which is every bit as good of a school as Harvard or Yale, but has a more established athletic history. Or they could have, gone and grabbed Cal too, right, and taken over New York and the Bay Area in the process. So I don't think there's any chance of that. I don't think Harvard and Yale, candidly, care. And as sports fans, athletics matters. Athletics doesn't really matter at all to Harvard and Yale. Remember, they basically canceled sports for 2 years, I think, because of COVID. and the overall budget of Harvard and Yale athletics is a pinprick of it. So I think there is legitimately a 0% chance of them making that move. If the Big Ten wanted to expand, I think they would expand further west. I don't think the dollars add up, which is why I don't believe they're taking Washington or Oregon or Cal or Stanford, who would have been ecstatic, I think, to leave with USC and UCLA. But I think they'll probably stay stuck at 16 for some time to come.
I think the biggest hindrance would be the Harvard and Yale people wouldn't want to lower themselves to bring in the level of athlete they would need to compete at sports in that level. That would be a big stumbling block. But, Clay, I also don't buy the TV market argument, just like I didn't buy it when Rutgers went to the Big Ten and suddenly the entire New York market was all Big Ten. People in New York don't care about Rutgers. People in New York know Harvard and Yale way more than Rutgers, and people in Boston. Those are national brands, Harvard and Yale, that people could get behind if they're good in sports.
It's a 0% chance. Look, the play for Rutgers was based on what is increasingly becoming an anachronism, which was the cable and television markets for expansion. And so when you are in a new market, so Cablevision, whatever the primary cable and satellite subscribers were in the New York City metropolitan area, you can charge a substantial premium for those markets. That's why the SEC went and got Texas A&M in Texas. It's why they took Missouri. And frankly, there's an argument. That's why the Big Ten is still doing the LA market, because I don't know what their coverage looks like in a market that big. But you can charge about 10x the cable and satellite subscription dollars. It's why if the SEC expanded, they would add North Carolina and Virginia, because when you have a local team in those marketplaces, you get to charge about 10 times as much money. So let's say that the SEC added Virginia Tech, and I don't remember the exact numbers. I used to know them, but let's say there are 9 million cable and satellite subscribers in the state of Virginia, and that might be too high, but let's say it's 9. Well, you would go from 10 cents times 9 million per month to $1 times 9 million per month. And so the dollars would add up such that schools paid for themselves. And really, I think the idea behind the Big Ten adding Rutgers and going to the East Coast and making a play there was the Big Ten was close to getting not just Rutgers and Maryland, but also going down the coast and picking off Virginia and the University of North Carolina. So that was their play. They did not have it happen. We'll see what happens going forward, with the ACC schools. That's why the ACC went north and added Syracuse and why they added Boston College. If the Big Ten wanted to add a school in the Boston area, which I don't think they do because I don't think the dollars add up, I think they would add Boston College. And if they wanted to add another school in New York, which I don't think they do, again, I think they would grab Syracuse. So that's the math behind it. The math just doesn't add up for either Yale or Harvard as making sense.
What exactly was Patrick Reed expecting when he approached Rory McIlroy after suing the guy a few months ago and tried to greet him on the golf course in a practice round?
Yeah, I don't know a ton of the details about the lawsuit, but expecting to get like a bro hug when you filed a lawsuit against somebody is, I think, a little bit awkward. Now, maybe Patrick Reed is just not that plugged in to what's going on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes guys have advisors who, those guys are basically small businessmen and sometimes big business, in the case of Rory and Tiger and everything else. But it seems like Patrick Reed is just kind of socially awkward and not really aware necessarily of how his actions are perceived on the larger tour. I think that's kind of what that interaction. I watched the video where he kind of tossed the tee at Rory, and it just seemed to me like this is a guy who's very socially awkward. Maybe doesn't necessarily have bad intentions, but just really doesn't have a sense for how his actions are being received on the tour.
Clay, I've got, let's see, San Fran is getting 2.5 this weekend. Chiefs, they're getting a point at home at Arrowhead now, so the Bengals are actually favored after opening up as the underdog. Who are you betting and why?
Well, I think the challenge for Chiefs Bengals, and I'm taking the Chiefs, is, analyzing the overall health of Patrick Mahomes, because that's why the line has moved as it has. Ultimately, I think it's hard not to take the Chiefs as a home underdog against the Bengals, even understanding the fact that the Bengals have won their last 3 in that series. I also like the under. And then I believe the 49ers have probably the best roster outside of the quarterback position in all of the NFL. And so I like them. I also like the under, but I like the Eagles traveling cross country. I like the 49ers in that game as the underdog against the Eagles, with 2.5.
Who do you think the NFL wants to win these games?
I think the NFL is in a really good spot in the AFC because either Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow are so young and such superstars that they will do really well regardless of which team comes out of the AFC side. On the NFC side, I would probably bet that I think they're in decent shape there as well. I tend to think the 49ers are a bigger brand than the Eagles, and they might like the story of Brock Purdy more than they like the story of the Eagles. But so I tend to think maybe a little bit 49ers. But again, I don't think they're in a bad spot because Jalen Hurts, when you have a young quarterback who has performed at the level that he has in a big East Coast media market, it's hard to go wrong in that dynamic at all. Probably they would rather have Fox. I mean, Fox has this game. It's a good question. I would think they'd probably rather have East Coast to West Coast, right? Yeah. So if they could draft the Eagles and the 49ers as the teams to play, they probably would prefer those two. But the NFL is such a big brand now that market size doesn't matter that much. I mean, Kansas City and Cincinnati are not big markets. It really matters how much do people care about the stars. And I feel like Burrow and Mahomes are such big names now that either way they're going to do fine. But I would rank them probably as, Eagles 1 or 49ers 1, East and West Coast probably favored. And then I think they're going to be pretty ecstatic about whoever they get out of the AFC.
Clay, I was blown away to see because I would say the Eagles would be the draw with the East Coast part of it and that franchise having a huge following. But the 2018 Super Bowl that featured the Eagles win is like the second lowest rated Super Bowl in the last 17 years, which surprised me. I'll give you the one entry they probably don't want, Chiefs 49ers rematch from a few years ago. I would think that's probably the least desirable TV matchup.
I don't know about that. I think it would probably do fine because that game.
It's a Super Bowl. It's going to do fine whoever plays.
But the game matters. The quality of the game matters more than the teams that are involved. And remember, they're really coming up on a big number because I don't know, was it 45 million people watched 49ers Cowboys? And I think that's the number. And they're going to have a monster number in AFC, NFC. That matters because the bigger the buy-in, the more people who follow through, right? Because you're a little bit invested. I think that 2018 number is partly a function of the disaster that was the Kaepernick protest years. So if you go look, there was a pretty significant blip in terms of what the ratings did because I do think people decided not to watch the NFL during the Kaepernick protest. It seems like the NFL has come through that. And what no one talks about that has become a big benefit is they now get the benefit of out-of-home viewing. So for people who watch, for instance, in a sports bar, they weren't counted until a couple of years ago. And that basically has juiced all the numbers by about 10%. So if you had, let's say, 90 million people watching, now you get to count 100 million basically. Because those numbers have gotten juiced just in the past couple of years. So I think they're going to have a good number. I think crazily, when the Super Bowl tends to peak, and people don't realize this, the halftime show, the biggest, most watched part of the Super Bowl almost every year is the halftime show. And so I think Rihanna is going to draw a lot of eyeballs. And if they got a competitive game, regardless of who the two teams are, I think they're setting up, given the lead-in that they're going to have in terms of AFC and NFC audience, the superstars that are involved with Mahomes or Burrow. You basically have a made man in some sense in Burrow or Mahomes who are already superstars. And the NFC side is going to be the upstart challenger, whether it's, hey, Brock Purdy coming out of the overall last draft pick out of nowhere, or even Jalen Hurts. To be fair, a lot of Eagle fans would have said coming into the start of the year in September, hey, this is his audition year. But I really think most Eagle fans expected that they would be going back to the draft to get someone new. And to Jalen Hurts' credit, he's just played out of his mind this year.
Clay, have a great week, man, and go win in Vegas.
Yeah, enjoy Vegas, man. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Appreciate you all. Have a good week.
All right.